Alright guys, so today we are doing lesson 21 part 2. Yesterday we did the first part of the objective, which was to explain the size of the products, and today we're going to focus on the second half, which is to relate fraction and decimal equivalence. So I'll give you a second to take out your notebook and copy the objective down along with today's date. Please pause the video now to give yourself a chance to do that. So relating fraction and decimal equivalence. What that basically means is connect. We know that relate means to connect fractions and decimals when they are equivalent, when they are the same. We know that the same number can be represented by both a fraction and a decimal. They're the same thing. They both represent parts of a whole in two different ways. So it's basically turning fractions into decimals and decimals into fractions. You can turn any fraction into a decimal, any fraction at all. You don't have to copy this down. I'm just going to show you as a quick side note. You can copy it if you want to. Let's take the fraction, for example, 3/8, right? 3/8. We know that 3/8 is the same as 3 divided by 8. 3 divided by 8. Or 3 divided by 8. All ways to show the same thing. If you do long division and take that into decimal form, you will have turned your fraction into a decimal. How many times does 8 go into 3? It can't. Add a decimal point and a 0. How many times does 8 go into 30? The answer is 3. It's 24. 6 left. Add another 0 to bring down. How many times does 8 go into 60? 7 times, which is 56. Subtract and get 4. Add another 0 to bring down. How many times does 8 go into 40? It's 5. No remainder. So 3/8 as a decimal is 3.75. Excuse me. So this is the way that you can turn any fraction into a decimal. But there are some fractions that are much easier to turn into decimals. You don't have to do long division at all. And those are the fractions that we're going to talk about today. So I want to just remind ourselves that decimal land, when we talk about places to the right of the decimal, we look at the first 3 places in 5th grade. We know that they continue on indefinitely, just like, or infinitely, I should say, just like they do in the whole number realm. We know that the first place is the 10ths place. Please copy this down just to remind yourself. The second is the hundredths, and the third is the thousandths. Pause the video to copy that if you need to. So sometimes we have fractions that have a tenth, a hundredth, or a thousandth as the denominator, like 3/10. Turning that into a decimal is super easy. 3/10. Or let's say 15/100. Super easy to turn that into a decimal. 15 landing in the hundredths place, 15/100. Or 27 thousandths. A 27 landing in the thousandths place. So if you have a tenth, a hundredth, or a thousandth as your denominator when it's a fraction, it could not be any easier to turn it into a decimal. There are some fractions where the denominator is not a 10, a 100, or a 1,000, but you could very easily make it that. For example, 2/5. There is no fifths place. There is no fifths place. So we can't just take it and stick the 2 into one of those places. We could divide it like we did here with long division. 2 divided by 5, 2 divided by 5, and do this. But there's an easier way to save yourself some time. I can turn my fifths into tenths, hundredths, or thousandths very easily. If I choose to turn my 2/5 into tenths, how did my 5 become a 10? I multiplied it by 2 to turn it into tenths. So that's what we have to do to the numerator, because with fractions you have to keep everything fair and balanced, and that's how you get equivalent fractions. So 2/5 is the same as 4/10. And 4/10 is 4/10 as a decimal. So that's what we're doing today. We're finding fractions that can easily have the denominator turn into a 10, 100, or 1,000. Let's try 1/4. Remember, we're looking for a 10th, a 100th, or a 1,000th. I'm going to put those up there just as a reminder. There's nothing that I can multiply 4 by that would give me 10. But there is something that I can multiply 4 by that would give me hundredths. So I could pick hundredths as my new denominator, because I know that I can multiply 4 by 25. Think about quarters and money. Right, 4 quarters, 25 cents each, gives me $1. I know that I can multiply 4 by 25 to get me 100. So when I multiply the numerator by 25, 25 hundredths, 25 hundredths, which is why 1/4 is equivalent to 25 hundredths. Let's try 3/20. Oh, sorry. Something in my throat. 3/20. Again, there's nothing that I can multiply 20 by that would give me 10. I could divide it by 2, and that would work, except I can't divide 3 by 2 and get a whole number. So I can't do that. If this was like 6/20, I could cut them both in half and have 3/10. But this is 3/20. If I cut my 20 in half and divide it by 2, I'd get 1.5 at the top, and we can't do that. So, but I can multiply by something to get me 100. If I multipy it by 5, I get 100. So if I have to match what I do to the bottom, match it to the top. 3 times 5 is 15. And we're going to be at 15 hundredths. Same thing, what if I said 23/25? Right, you're going to think about, what can I multiply 25 by? Can 25 turn into a 10th, a 100th, or a 1,000th? It can turn into a 100th. Multiply it by 4. So I have to do that to the top. 23 times 4, 92. 92 hundredths. Let's look at one last one, but this is going to be a whole number. I mean, a mixed number, rather. 5 and 41/50. So these are 5 wholes. We're going to keep that on the side and try not to forget about it. Let's turn our fraction. 50 can become a 10, 100, or a 1,000th. 100 would be super easy. We're just multiplying it by 2. Multiply the top by 2. And we're going to 82 hundredths. So 82 hundredths is like this. Don't forget about your 5. It's 5 wholes, 5 ones. So that would simply go in the ones place. Your decimal would be 5 and 82 hundredths. 5 and 82 hundredths, or 41/50. Alright, so pretty simple today, turning fractions into decimals using the denominator, making equivalent fractions of tenths, hundredths, or thousandths as a denominator. Alright, please check back to our daily lesson plan so you can see which problems you're doing. It's page 322, number 2, all of the examples. I can show you quickly since I have my book right here. It's these right here. You're going to do all of these examples, including A and B. They give you a little bit of help here, but I don't think it's too distracting or too difficult to follow what they're trying to do. They're trying to tell you multiply the top and bottom by 25. Multiply the top and bottom by 25. And the second part of your math, since this should not take you all that long, IXL G12. It's a similar process of turning fractions into decimals, and you need to do 15 minutes or a score of 100, whichever comes first. So that means do 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, you can stop no matter what your score is. I did 15 minutes, but I only got to 85. Is that fine? Yes, that's fine. Or if you get to 100, let's say it only takes you 10 minutes to get to 100, you can stop. All right. Good luck, and let me know if you have any problems.